Hey, Sterling, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, Corey, thanks for having me.
Excited to have you on, and really excited about this episode to talk about, there's lots of ways to get into deals, and, you can find a deal, you can have your own money, or you can kind of do what I think you've done really well is help find money, OPM, and bring that to people that have deals already going, and really put yourself into deals that necessarily maybe you wouldn't. And I think it's a great story, and I'd love to discover it a little bit more. But before we do that, just tell us a little bit more about who Sterling is, and as a person, what do you like to do for fun, and kind of give us your backstory a little bit.
Sure. So, name's Sterling Chapman. I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I got two little boys, a 2.5-year-old, a 1-year-old. And so that's a kind of full-time endeavor outside of business. I started I was in corporate America. I went to LSU for finance, and then went back and got an MBA, and I was going to be the next CFO of this telecom company. And I was moving up the corporate ladder, and I just realized that I had three big epiphanies, around the same time. And one was that no matter how hard I worked to get ahead, they would just turn up the treadmill. They were going to squeeze every drop. There was never going to be any getting ahead. The next one was that I was completely dispensable. They could turn off the tap at any time. And I just envisioned myself being like in my 40s with these kids in private school and this mortgage and this car and this company I devoted my life to for X number of years just turned me off. Somebody in, corporate headquarters looking at my number on a spreadsheet, doesn't even know my name. Boom, everything's gone. That terrified the hell out of me. And the other thing was staring down the barrel of working until I was 70, So I was like, there's got to be a better way. So I started, looking into personal finance and Read Rich Dad Poor Dad, buying a bunch of rental properties, going that route. And when I was buying and fixing up rental properties, people started to take notice, and people started to throw money at me to buy and fix up these houses. Well, what I found was more people wanted to invest with me than I could really substantiate with the houses. I couldn't get enough houses to accommodate all this money. So I decided I wanted to get into large multifamily properties. But hold
on. I'm going to pause it right there for just a quick second.
Yeah.
All right. Because now, what was it that allowed people? So you're starting to do some single family stuff, right?
Sure.
And how did you get all that people? Where did those people come from? Or is just, how do you think you attracted that capital in the first place?
Well, I mean, there's a lot about attracting I see people on Facebook all the time where I'm sure you're in just as many different little real estate groups as I, and you see these kind of newbies come out and they're trying to raise capital. They're trying to do deals. And then you go look at their personal Facebook page, and there's disrespectful stuff. There's over the top political stuff. There's, there's all this kind of like stuff that diminishes your personal brand. And I think it's very important to focus like 100% of the time, like everybody is looking at you. So I've just always been a big believer in polishing your personal brand in front of everybody all the time. So right. That's step one. That's where I found success in advancing quickly in corporate America. I think it's exposure, network, and performance. You get in front of the people and look good when you're in front.
So just from what you were doing in your work life, you built up a lot of integrity about who you are.
Yeah. I mean, I had demonstrated success before I'd got to, right. I was successful in my corporate life. I'd gotten a master's degree. I had demonstrated that I can follow through on a commitment. And then when I started buying the single family houses, I was just posting all the time about what I was doing, and people just naturally became curious.
So this is your Facebook friends, all the network of people that say, and they're like, hey, I want to be a part of that. Right? How do I do that? Right? How do I fund your next house?
Yep, exactly. Well, a lot of people approach me because they're like, well, I want to go do a house myself. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, it's a lot of work. And they see how much work it is. They go, well, I'm like, well, there's another option. You could always just put up the money and I could do it.
Boom. Okay. So I love that takeaway. That's where I want to get some juice, right? Because that's the shit that really happens in life, right? I believe this. This is why I teach people how to fish. Teach what you know, right? And what happens is there's lots of people that start this journey that they really want to, right? And Sterling, what happens is the minute it gets, oh, this is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And they get this like deer in the headlights look, they're looking around and they finally realize, and you just say, all you got to do is say the magic words. Why don't you just give them your money to me and you can live vicariously through me. I'll do all the work and I'll share with you in the success.
Yeah. So that's where it all started. You know, I started taking on people's cash for the single family business, and I still do a lot of single family stuff with a lot of investor capital. But from there, you know, at the time, I guess this was mid 2019, I was managing my rental properties myself. I had a full-time job. I had a 1-year-old kid. I was just like pulling my hairs out.
Yeah.
And I read Joe Fairless's book about apartment syndication. And that was when I was like, oh man, that sounds really cool. And I started my podcast, which you're going to be on tomorrow, I believe. But I started the Rent Roll Radio Show to basically force myself to network and learn every week.
Yeah.
And then just kind of build on that brand and establish myself as a thought leader in the industry. So like, if nothing else, I have interviewed 125 other really smart, successful investors. I've got to have a leg up on the regular Jack that hadn't done that. You know what I mean? I'm learning every week. So that was what I started the podcast. I decided that, you know, at the time I had more people wanted to invest with me than I could handle their money or had anywhere to put their money. But I didn't really have the capacity or really the interest in going and underwriting 1,000 apartment deals, right? I can underwrite a single family house on the back of a napkin or in my head in about 30 seconds. But when you get to 150 unit apartment complex, I mean, there's a lot of levers, and
it's a whole other ball game, right? Yeah.
And I always tell everybody, because I talk about how much I dislike it so much. I'm afraid my investors are going to start to think I can't do it. Look, I got 2 finance degrees. I could underwrite a deal if I want to. I just don't like to sit in front of Excel for 8 hours straight and go cross-eyed underwriting 15 deals a week. So I found some really great partners that are like way smarter than me and way better at that than I am. And we teamed up and I said, look, man, I'm a big believer in doubling down on your strengths. And I just really love talking to investors. I really love educating people on how it works. I really love the networking aspect and the brand building aspect and all the things that make me a solid capital raiser. And I really think that, my partners that are underwriting and acquiring these deals, they do a better job than I would at it. Yeah. So, I mean, I just think it makes sense.
No, and there's a reality to that. So, and here's a big secret, right? Everybody thinks the money's in real estate. I'm going to tell you, I don't believe it is, right? I think the money's in the money.
Sure.
Those who can go out and find capital, that's where the money's at, right? Get good at doing this one skill set. And by the way, this is the skill set, what you're talking about, raising capital is needed in every seminar, any place that I would go. So I always say, like when I go to those, like we were just at, and we met at the Best Ever conference, right?
Yep.
So I go to those things. A lot of people are going there to look for money, right? I'm trying to find money, and dude, thousands of people are looking for money.
Yeah.
And I find that it's better to go in there saying, I am the money. All of a sudden you become a really popular person in the whole thing, right? I am the money, right? And then it's amazing the different attraction, right? And essentially that's what you're doing is you're going out and saying, guys, I am the money. I can go out and raise capital. I have the ability to raise capital. I've done it. And now you're getting a track record, right?
Sure.
And what does that do for you?
I mean, it's exponential growth, right? You know, I going into my first project, I borrowed my track record from the single family space, but that really only gets you so far, right? Because it is a different animal.
Yeah.
But after the first project went way over expectation. I mean, we underwrote rents to eventually get up to 1,500. They're already at 1,325, right at a year later. So, I mean, we just knocked that one out of the park. So not only did we get all of our first time investors back into our second project we just wrapped up, but, they brought in all their friends. So the word of mouth is, I mean, the better you do, the more, I mean, who your biggest sales folks are is your investors. I mean, everybody wants to brag about how much money you're making.
It's a snowball.
They people feel like they're smarter than the average bear if they're getting higher than average returns, and they want to brag to their friends.
Yeah.
And when they brag to their friends go, well, who's getting you that much money?
Yeah. Where do I find that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I love the analogy, because it really is a snowball effect, right? As you go on this journey. Now, are you there to where you can, are you full time now doing what you do? Or are you still got one foot in the door?
I got 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I'm hoping to be done by the end of the year.
Yeah. Well, and what does that look like? What does that look like for you, just in a personal sense of what it will do for you?
So what will going full time do for me?
Yeah. What does that look like? What does that do for your psyche and who you are?
Well, it does a lot. So it does a lot so first of all, I'm very, very flexible with my day job. So it's, from a time perspective, it's never really limited with the amount of energy I can put into this.
Yep.
It does limit certain aspect. I don't go and openly prospect for investors on LinkedIn, because I have a million corporate connections and my employees on there and all that kind of stuff. And I just feel like,
don't want to pollute the pool, right? Yeah.
Right. So, from that aspect, I think for my psyche also, it'll, although it's not a huge time commitment, there is a huge mental bandwidth commitment, right? I manage a sales team. So are we going to hit goal? What kind of problems does Billy have? You know what I mean? Yeah. I got 12 employees. It's like, they call me all the time. So,
right.
Freeing up that extra bandwidth will definitely go a long way.
Well, and I always say, what about the time too, right? Because it's the time piece, even though that's, it's not as time committed, but like you said, you got kids, you got family, and all that stuff, right?
Sure.
Like that is a different, and then what are you showcasing to your little ones, right? That's the part.
Yeah.
So what your open is like, no one wants to work for the man. When you start really think about it, you're like,
yeah,
that looks like a shitty view, right? No pun intended, right?
Yeah.
And the gift of giving, this is what I found for my kids too, right? I get my gift of showing them entrepreneurial dad, right?
Sure.
Since they've been little kids, right? And to see that change, right? Because the talk's different, right? Mm-hmm. I bet you're talking different. Like now that what your talk was before you found the real estate, and now what's the difference in the talk?
Yeah, well, I mean, my kids are 1 year old and 1 and 2.5, so there's not a whole lot of conversation.
Never too young.
There's not a whole lot of conversation. But I'll tell you, I mean, my worldview is different. My attitude is different. It has completely transformed my life and how I view formal education, structure, demand, all of it. I mean, they will have a completely different life with a completely different dad, with a completely different viewpoint, because of what's happened over the last 4 years in the real estate space.
That's what I'm trying to say, right? That's my point. Yeah. And I think that's the why.
That they won't be pressured into go to college. They'll be playing cash flow in middle school. You know what I mean? They'll get it. They'll be taught how to start and run businesses. They won't be pressured into, being rule follower. My kids already getting kicked out of school at 2.5. My wife said, "Oh no," I said, "I don't give a shit. That's me right there. I love that. All of that hyperactivity and energy and stuff that's getting him, in trouble because he doesn't fit in that box today is why he's going to be super successful in the future."
Yeah, it really is it's really weird. I have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old, right? So, and we've talked, now they're still going to college because mom's Filipino and they're got to go to college, right? And my daughter's like, well, I think I'm gonna go to pre-med, right? She's like, I was like, well, internally I'm like, we'll see about that. Yeah. I've not told her that, right? I'm like, go and do it, right? If that's your dream, go crush. but I think she's going to get down the road and realize that, gosh, damn, this is 12 years to, the only thing I'll give her is that she'll come out of it out of debt, right? No debt free. But, and it's funny because I feel like now my son's the smart one. Dad, I'm gonna go to college. I'm gonna try to play football. When I get done with that, I'm coming home. I'm coming into the family business. I'm like, attaboy, smart.
No, I think college was a great experience, and I'm not one of those you run around in the real estate, and some people are like super anti-college. I mean, I don't buy into that.
Yeah, I don't either. I didn't go, but I wish I would have.
Well, it certainly didn't hurt. I'll tell you this: from raising capital, the fact that I got 2 finance degrees definitely doesn't hurt me. Nobody thinks less of me when they're handing me a check because I got all of that formal education around finance.
No, I think it does, and so that was my point too. It's just like, I think one of the biggest gifts, for me, the biggest gift is raising your kids as best you can, right, and giving them those ideas, right. So many people like you didn't catch the idea till later on in life, but what if you would have had it introduced at a younger age? Sure. I always say to that, if I would have had that, right?
Dude, I meet people on the podcast and other places that are 22 years old starting. Man, I'd be done if I'd started this at 22.
Because you had so much energy at 22, you could grind all the time.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be a game changer starting early.
So where do you see and so as you've raised capital, what do you think some of the 3 or 4 tips or things that you've done the best at to help attract that capital?
So, one thing that I've done is I've given away as much freely as I possibly can. So every time, and as somebody as popular as yourself, I can imagine the time restraints you come against trying to do this. But, every time somebody reaches out to me for my podcast, I go have coffee with them. I do local meetups where I educate people. I'm constantly trying to help as many people I can on the phone. And like we were talking about in the beginning, most of the people that have invested with me are people that I tried to help become active investors that just determined it was more work and they just decided they wanted to, or even a few of them are active investors and they had money sitting in a 401k that they rolled over to a self-directed and couldn't invest in their own deal. So they put it in mine. Yeah. So I've had a tremendous amount of success just from helping other people and educating other people. And
that's huge. Where do you see the future going in the next kind of 5 years crystal ball? Where does Sterling go?
For the market? Oh,
no,
for Sterling or
you,
for the market?
Forget the market. Like, who cares?
Well, we might. No,
we'll talk about both.
Yeah.
I like your personal journey. Yeah.
So I've had, and I know I talked to a lot of people that are against this model. And, most people I talk to are like, well, I used to do single family and I've graduated to multifamily and I never looked back. I mean, I make a lot of money in single family business. I mean, I make a lot and, I take that money and I invest, from when I sell houses, I invest that money alongside my investors in these big deals. I use that money as, hard money deposits and all these
startup costs. Yeah.
So, and when I quit my job at the end of the year, if I don't find a deal for a year, I'll be living off of the cash flow from my rental properties. So, I'm going to keep doing that. I want to ramp up the private. I want to be Corey Peterson. I want to ramp up, I want to ramp up the marketing. I'm in the process of a huge marketing refresh right now. Redoing my websites, redoing my active campaign, my CRM, and all of my content that I put out. I'm actually hiring your podcast editor to promote my podcast.
Okay,
really ramp up the exposure. I really like, I have had a lot of success locally raising capital, and I mean, I'm still we need another deal, right? I've still got capital lined up waiting to be placed. But what I would like to do is have that model where I'm raising from accredited investors across the country that are not referrals of referrals or friends of friends, that is truly a like, a guy in Nebraska who's never met me, but downloaded my lead magnet, went to my website and signed up for my investor club and is getting our projects, and where I can raise $10 million in 3 days from, 70% of the people I don't know.
Yep.
I want to grow into that over the next few years.
So it's interesting, right? I'm doing the exact opposite right now, right? I'm changing my whole thing. I don't want that anymore, right? So it's interesting to hear because there's no rhyme. Like, money is everywhere, right? You know that, right? There's money everywhere, and online function. Like, we're trying to go more local now. So my model that I've just changed, right, is I finally have a real office, and we're actually going to hire financial advisors, right? So now that's the difference too, is I'm going to hire some people, okay? But this is kind of, I would say, do exactly what you're doing. And then level 2 is to go back into local, because once I hire these financial advisors, their goal is just going to go out into my local market and kind of act as a financial advisor. We're going to create a fund for them to come in, and we have an office, a real building where they can bring clients in, and we can share the story and close them. But I will tell you, there's so much money everywhere that having good funnels and follow-up systems is paramount to any capital raising process, right?
Yeah.
And what has that done for you in finding those types of people? Where do you envision that piece going? Are you gonna get more on the education side a little bit more?
I will. Are you talking about like paid education programs?
Yeah.
That's never been part of my model. It's got to be a good model because everybody seems to do it. Do you do paid education?
Man, I'm getting out of that too. Right. So it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I always say, like, there's always so it's really interesting in my mind. And now we're having this conversation, right? It's like a conversation of how we do stuff, right? Maybe this is probably the best part of the podcast. I don't know. I always come back to, sometimes, like, I'll do a season of something and see if I like the season. I love educating. Just like you, I was you way back when I started. I just wanted to give, man. If I had somebody that knew something that needed some help, I feel like that's how we're commissioned to be as people, right?
Sure.
Like, there's a picture I've seen a long time ago. It was Jesus standing in the water, and he was reaching down, and someone had a hand up, and he was drowning, and he's got a hold of Jesus's hand, right? And he's lifting him up, but he's got his other hand down below, and he's grabbing someone a little farther down than he is, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like you always have someone you look up to, but you always should be trying to pull somebody up. And I think that's exactly what you're doing. And it's the right thing. The challenge is to do it and try to make money is so much work. That's what I found. I'd rather do it free.
Right.
When I give away free, then there's no pieces to it.
Well, I mean, it's never, I mean, it's free to the consumer, but it's never a sunk cost for you, in my opinion, because they're always going to come back to you as an investor.
It always has. That's the best part of it, right? But when you run it as a business, then it's more because you feel like you got to be salesy, right? And I hate being salesy. That's not my. You got to become the guru guy, right? And I'm like, I hate that title.
I went to some capital raising, like 3-hour seminar. I'm not going to name the guy here because a bunch of people listen to your podcast. I don't want him to hear me, but I was so pissed off because I thought there was going to be some good content in here. And I rearranged my plans to go to this 3-hour deal. And all he was doing the whole time was trying to sell me his $20,000 coaching program.
Yeah.
And there was zero content. And I know this guy. I've interviewed him before. I've met him. I liked him. I'm so pissed off that he took my 3 hours and did nothing but try and sell me pay coach. Like Joe Farrell puts out tons of content for free.
Yes.
But he's got a million investors because everybody appreciates him putting out that content.
Yes.
Everybody looks to him as a teacher.
And then he has to pay to limit the amount of people that come through his funnel because it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I agree. You create enough massive value. But I think it's the best tool for getting investors is teaching.
Yeah.
Right. So
sure.
that's what I guess that's my yin and yang to it. Right. So we're doing this year. I'm doing only one event, and I called it my last, and it may or may not be my last one. I think it's probably my last one for this year. We'll say I might open it up next year, where I have a true 3-day training course, right? But we used to do that thing 4 times a year, and what happened was I'm always on the road, or I got to resell this and set it up and start selling it. I'm like, what's my primary business? My primary business is just owning apartments and operating them. Right. That's what I really love to do. Right. So I had to say, what's my priorities? Right. I guess, and everybody changes, just like you like where you're at right now. It makes a lot of sense. You're like, hey, I don't have to find the deals. I just got to find the good partners, bring value. I get a piece of the GP and I'm set up. That to me, it makes so much sense.
And I don't know what that evolution will look like. I'm not, there's a lot of guys that kind of, I always say, whore themselves out to every little group out there with their capital. And though I don't like doing that. I like my investors' capital. I like knowing exactly where it is. I like being on the weekly meeting calls. I like walking the properties beforehand. I like knowing I have a seat at the table and a vote. And I've got the same small group of guys that we work together over and over again. We just have different branded companies, right?
Yep, got you.
But
you feel comfortable in that, right?
I feel like, again, I feel it's as much my deal as it is theirs. You know what I mean? They just took lead on the acquisition side, and I took lead on the capital side, and we both shared the asset management piece. So Beautiful. That's different than these guys that go show up and, they raised $500,000 for a $50 million deal and they're not invited to the weekly call. You know what I mean? That I don't want my capital. I don't want to send my capital out to places that I have no control. I feel like that's not. Yeah,
because you're selling yourself. You're really truly selling yourself too, and you want to make sure you've taken the time to do the due diligence on your partners.
Right.
And I don't think you have to say.
I guess that'll looking 5 years down the road. I don't know how that relationship will evolve. Whether one day I'll start, hiring more internally on the acquisition side, or if we'll move more towards just a continued exclusive type of relationship there. I don't know how that'll evolve. I'm really big on focusing on your strengths. And right now, I think the area that I could really blow out of the water the most, if I really focused all my energy on it, is the brand building and the capital side. I like the education. I like the investor networking. I like the interviewing. I like, getting out there and meeting people and talking to people and explaining the process and the concept. So
I think that's powerful. I think that's the most powerful. I think that is powerful. And I think it'll blow up bigger than you even think. Right. I mean, just knowing who you are and your integrity, the way you're doing it is the right way. Right. And it'll tenfold it, or not, 100-fold it as you go. Cause it is that big snowball, right? It gains more and more traction as you roll. Yeah. And it gives you more options at that point.
Right. So you asked about the market too. So you want to talk about that? I'm curious. I said it's either going to go nowhere but up, or it's going to come crashing down. One of those two, right?
Yeah. Listen, I have to be risk adverse for my investors, right? That's the way I look at it. I'm very cautiously optimistic. I think inflation is going to keep going, even though rates are going to go up. Inflation is going to go up more, right? Sure. I don't think they're going to be able to curb it fast enough for at least the next 3 years or so, right? Sure. After that, it's anybody's game. But even then, for me, I'm only trying to buy cash flowing deals right now. If it doesn't really cash flow, like I even paused. I had a development deal that I was going to do, and I'm like, dude, no way, right now. I would hate to get into a development deal.
We passed on one 2 days ago.
And I own the land. I mean, I already own. This is just an additional to deal that I have, so I could do it. But like, man, there's just so many X factors that I don't know, like supply stuff, China.
Sure.
We got this Russia thing. I mean,
yeah,
dude, it's kind of scary right now. Like shit could really go bad. I don't know.
Yeah. You know,
and supply lines.
Right. I get asked a lot about the economic forecast, as I'm sure you and everybody that's a thought leader in the industry, right, get asked all the time. And I always say, like, I don't know. Like we interview experts all day, every day, and they all kind of say, well, it's either going to go straight up or it's going to go straight down.
No one freaking knows.
Nobody freaking knows. But I still sit in the camp that for us and where we are, as long as we stay away from like kind of high risk things like development and that kind of, but with us owning cash flowing real estate and like mid-level apartments, I don't think it matters.
Don't even matter what as long, like, listen, I just tell them, like, if we hold our shit, we can, as long as we cash flow. Yeah. Like, what's our worst case scenario? We keep holding a property until it becomes profitable.
I say this all the time. I say this all the time about my single family portfolio, because people are, be careful. I'm like, look, I don't give a shit if everything I own's value gets cut in half tomorrow. If everything I own is worth 50% tomorrow, what it is today, I don't care, because I have long-term fixed debt on it and it'll continue to cash flow. And I'll just wait until it goes back up before I ever think about selling it. That's the beauty.
You used the Great Recession, right? So I was doing real estate 2005, 2006 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, buying rental properties, right? I bought 4 of them, right? This is when I first really started out. And then I moved to Phoenix, and then the market crashed. I sold them now, but I owned all those properties through the whole crash. And the reason is they cash flowed. I didn't have to sell. Right. Had a long-term debt on it. My loan wasn't due. And so it didn't affect me one bit, right? And so
I always make the joke. In 2008, I was in college when the market crashed. I don't recall calling my landlord and telling him I was going to pay less rent. Like, we just kept paying rent.
Yeah. And so there's some beauty in that too. It's just like, I think that is why it's the right class, right? But I will tell you, I see a lot of people now buying in markets that they're not basing their stuff on cash flow. It's basing way on appreciation. And that's in Phoenix, Dallas, like some of these big ass markets where they're trading at 3 caps, for a 1970s product.
Right.
I'm like,
it's wild out there.
It is crazy, man. And so I feel sorry for those. I'm trying not to make those types of decisions, right? But sure. I'll tell you this, like the deal that we just came back from a due diligence on yesterday, $40 million purchase, we're buying it at a 7 cap. It's a student housing deal in a smaller school, a 9,000 student school outside of Pittsburgh. But due to cash flows, like after paying off my investors, almost $1 million a year.
Nice.
And I'm like, I don't care what it does. Right? I'm cool. Daddy gonna get paid. Even if my pay goes to half, I do half as good as I think, I'm still gonna make $500,000 after I've paid my investors and debt service and everything else. So I'm like, I'm okay. Trust me on this.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the way to do it, right?
Yeah. And we kind of stay out of those like central primary markets, like, like we're like, I guess you call it a tertiary market. We're like 40 minutes outside, like we're not in downtown Charlotte. We're in Rock Hill, South Carolina. We're not in downtown Atlanta. We're in Noonan, Georgia. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's what you got to buy. I think that's where the value's at for guys like us. That's exactly where you find nice little properties that you can create and affect change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, listen, as we wrap up, what would you tell any new investor or any even somewhat seasoned investor? What would you want to tell them about your journey, or that you'd want to give them some wisdom?
So I would just certainly encourage, anybody who's seriously committed to the process to stay seriously committed to the process. It takes longer to buy a $10 million apartment complex than it does a $200,000 house. So if you get out here and you look for 6 months and you don't find any, I mean, it took me 2 years from when I decided I wanted to buy an apartment building to when we closed on our first project was over 2 years. And so, I would just encourage you to stay committed to the process, stay around these guys that are already doing it, and just be patient.
Awesome. Yeah. The slow and steady wins the race, right?
For sure.
And then any books that you've been reading, anything that you've been reading lately that's really just said, man, that was a good read?
So I read a good bit. The last 2 books that I really enjoyed, one was the one by Sam Zell, Am I Being Too Subtle? Sam Zell pretty much invented the real estate REIT game. He's been doing it since the 60s. Really, really great book. One of the central kind of tendencies of that book, and one of his philosophies that just stuck with me that I just love, is he always tries to leave something on the table. He's about long-term relationship building. So anytime that he can make the deal work for him and still give the guy on the other side of the table a little more, he does that. And that's one of my central tendencies in my business. I put it on my website. I tell my employees all the time. So some people out there think what makes a great businessman is squeezing every penny out of every deal. That's not true at all. It's the exact opposite. What makes a great businessman is giving more and creating these long-term relationships where people want to do business with you over and over again. Right?
Yes.
Don't beat up, don't go back and retrade and put the broker through hell. They never want to work with you again. Be easy to do business with and make people want to keep doing business with you. That's what makes you a great business person.
Amen, brother. That's some great words of wisdom there. I love it, truly love it. How do people go out and find you?
They can find me at my website, crestworthcapital.com. They can find me on Facebook, Sterling Chapman, Instagram, Sterling Chapman REI. Or they can email me, sterling@crestworthcapital.com.
Awesome. Listen, I wanted to thank you for coming on the show, really providing some really neat insight on lots of ways to get into the real estate, right? Sometimes you just surround yourself with the right people and look for the money, right? You probably have integrity that you don't even know you have. And when you start surrounding yourself with the right team to help put that all together, just like Sterling did, he created a really nice little group and partnerships that he can go into deals with and provide tremendous value. Guys, that all starts though with your mind. You opened up and said, hey, one of the biggest things is to stick with it, stay committed, right? That's a mind thing, guys. You have to have, and it took him 2 years. You heard him say 2 years to get all the way to the end, right? It is that type of commitment. You have to tell yourself daily that you are the one, that it is worth it. Guys, if you believe it, you can achieve it, and your paradise is possible.